this was all circulating around the base, that a giant had been killed, but no one was supposed to talk about it.
I saw 3 long, bony fingers reach up underneath the door, curl up to grab it, and then disappear.
When he came over to me, dude, he slithered over to me.
And this giant comes out of the cave, and they're all frozen. And he starts running and firing at this giant. Well, the giant moves. He's got a spear in one hand, and he's running really fast and spears Dan and holds him up like this. Somebody yells, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. They basically decapitate him.
Got closer. When he got about 15 yards away from me, I raised that 12 gauge and I blowed his head off.
I feel something pulling at my leg, and I look over and there are 2 small gray entities pulling at me. And they're literally, I'm getting pulled off the bed.
I reached my hand into this bush and I touched air. Couldn't breathe and I couldn't move because I know I'm seeing a monster.
Listening to The Confessionals, I am your host, Tony Merkel. Thank you for being here. If you've had an encounter or a story you'd like to share with me on the show, go ahead and shoot me an email. My email address is theconfessionalspodcast@gmail.com. That's theconfessionalspodcast@gmail.com. Or go to the website, theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the contact section, and you can reach me that way as well. And if you want extra shows every week, consider becoming a member to the website, theconfessionalspodcast.com. Once you join and become a member, you get access to new episodes every Thursday. So if that's something that interests you, go to theconfessionalspodcast.com and check out the memberships. Now, this week we have Sara coming on the show, and Sara's going to talk about some different experiences that she's had, but it all seems to start with a great-grandfather who actually knew Travis Walton. And from that point on, her story unfolds where she's had UFO encounters, and from what you're about to hear, it really sounds like she was abducted. But before we get to Sara, I found something on the internet that reminded me that I never talked about it on the show beforehand. And about a year ago, I saw this video pop up, and it's baffling to me. So if anybody can actually explain to me how this is possible, I'd greatly appreciate it. But there's a video that popped up last year, and I don't want to tell you what it's saying. I want you to listen to the audio, and you tell me what you think you hear. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little exercise here. This is one of those Lori Yanny kind of things, but listen to this audio and just listen to it, and you tell me first off what you think you heard the very first time around, and then we'll dive into it some more. Okay, so now that you heard that, did you hear brainstorm? Because that's what you're supposed to have heard when you listen to this audio. But there's a lot of people who say if you think of the words green needle, you will hear the words green needle when you play this audio. So when I play this audio again, I want you to think of brainstorm first. You'll hear brainstorm. And then I want you to think green needle, and you're going to hear green needle. And if you really want to have some fun with it, listen for brain needle, because you'll hear brain needle as well. If you mix the words up, you'll actually hear that as well. So listen to the audio for brainstorm and green needle. It's pretty trippy. Check it out. All right, so that was some trippy audio that I came across about a year ago, and I never talked about it on the show, and I just saw it again this past week, and I just wanted to kind of throw it out there for you guys to listen to. Pretty trippy stuff, and if you can actually explain to me how it's possible that we can hear brainstorm and green needle off the same audio, please do so, because I find it very, very fascinating. Now let's get to this week's show. What we're going to do is we're going to listen to an audio trailer for this coming Thursday's member episode, and after that trailer, we're going to dive right into this week's episode with Sara. Let's go.
We had gone for spring water. It was the middle of the afternoon. I had a Honda Accord. We put the empty jugs in the back of the trunk, and we drove out to the spring. And we got out of the car, and we each carried a couple jugs up to the spring, and I was standing there filling jugs up. I could tell you what shirt I was wearing. I still remember very clear. And he was sort of standing next to me, and I was filling the jugs, and we were talking, and I remember hearing a noise, and I remember we both turned our heads. And then the next thing I remember is we're walking back to the car, and it's dark out. And I looked at him, and I said, didn't we come here when it was light out? And he said, yeah, I thought we did. And we got to the car, and the car wouldn't start. The battery was dead. So I ended up calling a friend to come and get us. I had seen him like a year ago, and I had asked him, I said, did this happen the way I remember it happening? That we walked up there. He said, yeah. And I said, do you remember anything? And he said, no. And I still have no memory other than the sun being over our shoulder and filling the jugs and hearing the noise. And that's the last thing I remember. And we ended up walking back to the car at least 6 hours later when it was dark.
All right, today I have Sara coming on. Sara, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. So we were just talking and stuff, and before we get into any of the stuff that you want to talk about tonight, which I think actually what we're about to talk about could segue into your actual UFO experience, but your grandfather was friendly with a pretty famous UFO abductee. Do you care to share with us?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, my great-grandfather was a logger up on the Kaibab Mountain, which is in northern Arizona. So people are familiar with other loggers in northern Arizona, especially down in the Snowflake area. They will know Travis Walton. And my grandpa worked with Travis Walton, logging up on the mountain. And when I was a kid, I was very enthused about, UFOs, Loch Ness Monster, Bermuda Triangle, and Sasquatch. That was kind of my deal. I was probably a weird little kid, but that's okay. I remember asking my grandma if she had ever seen a UFO or if she'd ever, seen lights in the sky, and she said, and that's when she shared with me, that. Oh, your great-grandfather, he worked with a man who was abducted by aliens, and they made a movie about him. And I'm like thinking, oh my gosh, they made a movie, I'm like, I can associate with this. I'm going to watch a movie about this guy. And she told me it was Fire in the Sky. And his name, well, she didn't tell me his name. And so I watched the movie, and I know that I watched it without my parents' permission because my parents are very strict, LDS, Latter-day Saints, and they would not allow me to watch any kind of PG-13 when I was really young. And so I was already kind of rebellious at that age anyway. Went out and watched this movie, and I was like, I knew it. They're real. It exists. It's gonna, this is my life now. And so yeah, it really brought in my mind. It opened my mind up to asking more questions, I think, and having more of a different way of thinking than my peers. I grew up in a really, really small town, and I have about 20 people in my graduating class. Wow. It was a small town. Yeah, there's like 500 people. So, in the town that I grew up in. And then it wasn't until, I think it was last June, that I actually had my incident where I saw lights in the sky, and I was able to video them, and I took pictures of them. I was with my friend Alexis, and she's the one who actually introduced me to your show, I'd like to point out, too.
Shout out to Alexis. Sixella. She's backwards like I am. It was around midnight. I told her I need to go get gas in my car.
before I forget, I'm one of those people where it goes down to the light coming on, and I go, "Oh my gosh, I'm out of gas. How did this even happen?" So we went down to the gas station, and this is we were in Kanab, Utah. So this is a tiny little town too. I think Kanab probably has about 7,000 people. So it's a little jump up from where, the town I'm from, which is about 17 miles north of here. We were headed down to the gas station, and we gassed up, and we were headed back, and I was driving down a street with no street lights on it. Like, it's dark, little tiny town. And she's like, "There's a light above the tree." And I was like, I'm trying to I'm behind the steering wheel, so I'm trying to look from where she's looking. And, I kind of turned a little bit, and I was able to see, and there was this huge orange light above the treetops. And it was probably about the size of a trampoline. It was really weird. And then it went pink, and it went out just like a flashlight. Like it just went out, and we're like, "What the hell was that? Sorry, what the heck was that?" Right? We get to her house. We're like, "Oh man, we saw a cool light. Like, that was really cool. Like, maybe it was somebody, like, with, I don't know. I mean, we really had no idea to speculate on that." And we got to her house, and we're outside of her backyard. And I look over, we have this hill. It's where I live. In Kanab, there's just red dirt everywhere. It's the hills are all red. I don't know if anyone's familiar with like Arches National Park, and there's just red dirt everywhere, red sand. And so this big red hill, of course it was the middle of the night, and it's called K Hill, and we're like looking at the hill, and there's this light, and it's going up and it's going down, and it's going left and right. There are no sounds, can't figure out, like, we're like, well, maybe it's a drone, right? I mean, I don't know. We were sitting there looking at it, speculating it, and that's when I took a picture and I took a video, and I actually stepped out onto her back lawn, and this is probably like an hour later, and the sprinklers came on. Like, none of the other sprinklers came on in the other lawns, and it was like, in the middle of the night, and the sprinkler came on her lawn, just her lawn. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they don't want me to step out and record it, And I was like, "Why are the sprinklers coming on?" She's like, "That's never happened before. I have no idea." We're like, "Whatever, like try and get my phone wet. Like, nice try, aliens. Like, I'm still going to record you, And so we're sitting there a little bit longer, and it's like at 3 o'clock in the morning. We sat out back. We were listening to our, podcast and smoking cigarettes, just chilling and hanging out. And I had just barely, March. I had been off probation for about 4 months now. 4 months then. And so I was able to stay out late. And so I was like, well, you know what? I want to go home. I'm going to go home and stay in my bed. I don't want to stay the night like I was planning on. So around 3 o'clock in the morning is when I head home. And so 17 miles north of here is where I'm from, in Orderville. And along that road, there are these huge sand dune hills. And there is a peak. And the peak is maybe 7,000, I think, elevation. And I get to that peak, and I'm like thinking, I bet I could turn around and look at Kanab and I can see that light. So I get out of my car, and I have a video of it, and there's Lincoln Park playing in the background as my Sirius XM. I wasn't like trying to plug, Lincoln Park, but I get out of my car, and I'm not even kidding you. It's probably like 500 yards away, and then maybe 100 yards up, this bright orange light. And I'm like, what? It's right there, So One thing that we noticed about the light when I was in Kanab was that it would glow really bright, and it looked like something would pop out of the top. And whenever that little thing would go back in, it would glow bright again. And it would like move around erratically. So I get out of my car and I'm looking at this light and it starts moving towards me. So I jump in my car and I'm freaking out and I'm driving down the road. And I didn't pass a single person on my way from Orderville to Kanab to Orderville. And my Sirius XM radio starts going in and out. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get abducted by an alien. This is great. This is how my life ends. Like, this is how it's going to be. And I drive probably 10 miles and I get almost to Orderville. Like, I got to like the welcome to Orderville sign. And I'm like, okay, I bet that light, I could see that light from where I'm sitting, like right here, you know? So I get out of my car and I look behind me and the light is right up there in the sky behind me. And I take another picture of it. And that's when I capture something coming up out of the top of it. And that's when and it has just this weird, it's shaped like a teardrop kind of. But it's like, it was changing. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. And I turn around and I'm like, there it is, folks. You know, I'm like talking to myself in the middle of the night out by a field, of course. But I'm like, there it is, guys. I don't know what it is. So I get back in my car and I drive into town. And on my way to my house, I'm probably only 4 houses away from my house. And I look to my left, and right above the cemetery is that orange light again. And it's clear. I live in a valley. It's a tiny little valley. And it's in the valley, and it's right above the cemetery. And and I think when I took that video, you can see in my car that it says it's like 3:30 in the morning. You can see it on my dash. And I'm listening to Audio Slave, so I have it turned up kind of loud. And I roll my window down. I'm like, well, there it is. Like, there's that light again. I don't know what it's doing. It was so bizarre. It was so weird. So I get to my house, and I get out of my car, try to look up there by the cemetery and see if it's there, and it's gone. And we have these huge white mountains that surround the valley, and they probably go up to about 9,000 in elevation. And that light had gone from the cemetery all the way up to above the White Mountains. And in a short amount of time, probably 2 minutes, a minute and a half of me driving to my house. It was so bizarre. And I get to my room. I can see it from my room, and it's still moving around, and it's still blinking, and it has those lights coming up out of it. And that was probably about, 3:30 in the morning. And I don't really remember after that. I remember waking up the next morning around 7 o'clock, 7:30. I don't remember getting into bed. I don't remember falling asleep. The MUFON, the guy that interviewed me for MUFON, he's like, you had missing time. I'm like, I did, but I don't want to admit that I had missing time because that's scary to me. Like that,
sure,
that weirds me out, so I just had a moment where I was sitting at the edge of my bed, and I saw this light, and then it was morning. Like, it was really bizarre.
So you're saying you were at the edge of your bed and you saw a light, and then that's all you remember?
Yeah.
What kind of light are we talking about here? Are we talking about a light that was in the sky, like you were watching, or a flash of light?
I was, a light. You know what? It was just, a bright light. It was just a light in the sky, and then I remember waking up in my bed. Then, like a few hours later, I don't remember even getting into bed or anything, and I don't know. It was totally bizarre. And I just like to tell myself I was so tired that I must have just crawled into bed and, but he liked it. He specified that as missing time. The guy from MUFON, and I was like, okay, man, whatever you say, you're the expert, I guess, but I don't want to admit that because that's scary to me,
Have you ever processed that in your mind since then? Have you ever come to a different conclusion, or do you still tell yourself you didn't have missing time?
I have. I acknowledge I have missing time. Yeah, like to me, from what I've had experience in my life, I guess. I do have. I used to have a reoccurring dream when I was a child where I had a bright light shine through because I'm in the same room that I was in when I was a little kid, where I had the experience with, my closet and the devil in my closet and the paranormal experiences I had when I was little. I'm back in that same room. So
is that where this happened?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. But when I was little, I used to have a reoccurring dream and nightmare that I had a bright light shine through that window, and something lifted me up, and I went through my window into the sky. I used to have a reoccurring nightmare about that when I was little.
How old were you?
I was probably about 6 or 7.
What was your knowledge of, missing time, abductions, aliens at that age?
This was before I had read that book. This is before I don't know, the dream that I had, when I was little too, I actually had like a sleep, I don't know what you'd call it. I had an issue with my sleep. I would go from, because you have apparently different layers to your sleeping when you fall asleep. You go from your first to your second to your third to your fourth to REM sleep. And you have to go through all of these in order to sleep well, I guess. When I was little, I had to be taken in and they had analyzed my sleeping. They put a cap on me and put little stickies on my head. And I apparently would go from the first to the second all the way down to REM. And then when I got to my REM, it was so deep that I couldn't wake back up again. And so they had to retrain me on my sleeping. And so I had a lot of issues with that when I was young.
This is not what I was thinking was going to be talked about here in this kind of way, which is fine.
Right,
obviously.
yeah.
I'm absolutely fine with that. Just because I'm sitting here thinking about, I think it was episode 78 when I did the interview with Ryan, who spent his entire life basically going through these missing time experiences, waking up with bruises on him, things like that. And
and I would sleepwalk as well too.
See, there's a lot of similarities there.
I would wake up outside a lot,
Yeah, see.
And this,
because he had a hard time admitting that he had any kind of alien abduction. I think he was able to admit that he had missing time, but the result of that missing time he couldn't come to terms with, and I think he pretty much came to terms with it while we were recording for the show. Because when we were talking beforehand and stuff, he's like, I don't know, and then by the end of the show, he's just like, yeah, I think I did.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of different crazy stuff happen to him. And I know you and I talked, and you sent me the list on your email of everything that you've had happen to you. You've had a lot of crazy things happen throughout your life, not just what we talked about so far. And
right.
I do wonder if these things are connected in any way. What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree. I know that you made a comment recently back about how, there are some people that live their life and they have absolutely nothing extraordinary happen to them. They grow up and they have these stable childhood, and they have normal things happen to them. They go to school and they go to college and they get a degree and they have a job and they open a business and that's their lives, you know, and that's how they live and that's how they exist, is just solely off of, you know, what's in front of them. And I attribute to like my father, like my dad, and I'm actually adopted. I've actually been really blessed throughout my life where my parents adopted me and my little sister. And I mean, I was like supposed to be born in, like, you know, in poverty in Mexico, and I came. My parents paid this woman to come across the border to have me so they could adopt me. And so for me to be here, and then I experienced all this throughout my life, like, it's just really fascinating to really kind of look at a timeline, or just kind of take a step back and look at a life and, you know, view it as how you live, how you want to, I guess. But yeah, I've had a lot of crazy stuff happen to me throughout my life, and I still do have crazy stuff happen to me, like pretty life-changing stuff, you know, and that would probably, I don't know if it would break another person, but it makes me like grateful that I'm, you know, so blessed to have Jesus in my life, and blessed that I have, you know, structure that that I'm able to build off of, you know, and to have a faith and have a testimony, and to know that the things that I've gone through has helped me get to where I'm at now, you know, and to be grateful for it, that it happened, you know, as much as it was horrible when it did happen, to be grateful that things have happened in my life to where I'm at now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm glad that, you know, throughout the things that happened in your life, whether it was, you know, self-inflicted or things that you really didn't have control over, that you did come out on top. I mean, like, or at least you're coming out on top, you know what I mean? Like, life is a journey,
exactly.
and we're, you know, constantly going through it till the day we take our last breath. So, I mean, it's just like, we're here now. Well, we don't know what's coming tomorrow, but the better we prepare today, the more we'll be able to handle tomorrow. So it's just being proactive about life. And a lot of people live their lives on default. They just let things happen. And you know, because I don't know how old you are. I'm 33 years old. And when I was 23 years old, I wasn't the same person I am today. And I fully expect that when I'm 43, I'm going to be a different person than I am today. And I can either control that change and, you know, try to be somebody I want to be, or I can let that change happen by default. But either way, it's going to happen. You're going to change. You're going to be a different person. That's just happened. That's just life. So kudos to you.
Live and let live, man. You know, like, it's not just about allowing ourselves to forgive, but it's about allowing ourselves to move forward with life too. Because if you can't, because it's easy for people just to be like, okay, well, that happened, I'm just going to allow it, you know, let it be a thing. But take something from it, move forward on life, use it as a stepping stone, put it in your tool belt, and, you know, next time, maybe, you know, I don't know, you know, but, yeah, I know some of, like, when you were like, some of those things were self-inflicted, and I was like thinking about, you know, like getting involved in the occult and getting involved with Satanism, and,
yeah, why don't you go into that?
How miserable my life was. I was totally and absolutely miserable, and I hated myself. And so when you hate yourself, you exude it upon everybody else too. You know, you project it to everything. And I used to hate everybody and everything. And so, it's amazing how, you know, and maybe it's not all the same for other Satanists. I can't speak for them, but for me, you know, that's how it was for me. And how having a different view on life and having positivity has completely changed my life. When I used to do seances when I was really, really young, in my parents' home. And I feel like, I contributed a lot to the paranormal activity that has happened in my home and that still happens today. I know I was going to ask you if you want me to send you that video. I have I was with my son, and he was just playing in the mud, and I'm like, yay, you know, this is fun. And we were home alone, the neighbors were gone, nobody is around, and you can clearly hear a man speaking with a Louisiana accent, like in the background of this video. And at the time, I didn't hear it. And so when I replayed it, I'm like, that's bizarre. Okay. This just happened, last year. And I'm like, oh crap. Like, I should really, apply some of this positive thinking and my values to really like getting rid of all these things that I've brought into my home. And so like I got rid of my tarot cards, and I got rid of my spell book, and I got rid of my pendulum, and I feel like it's made a big difference in my family's life and my family's home, and we did this one seance, and this was up at the it was like in the abandoned elementary school in Orderville, and there's three of us, and we each wrote a wish. This is what I wrote. We said we wrote a wish that we wanted something to happen in our lives. And my one friend, she wished that a boy that we knew would get acne because she hated him so much. And my other friend wished that her boyfriend would come back to her, and we cut ourselves and like drip blood onto the paper, and we burned it. And this is when I had like zero idea of how rituals worked. I had no idea. I hadn't read anything along those lines, and and we've all three of us have suffered from really late term miscarriages. And my last friend, my friend who wished for the boy to have acne, she lost her baby a couple of years ago, and you know what, I don't know, call it a coincidence, and I lost a child when I was about 6 months pregnant, and so did my other friend. I'm not going to say their names. They know who they are. I don't even know if they listen to this podcast or not, but out of respect for them, I don't want to say their names, but one of the coincidences that we would perform literally a blood ritual, and all three of us would lose, our children at a very, very late term. I found that really, that struck with me. That really resonated with me, because I'm like, this is real. This is real stuff, and it will affect your life, and it will really affect your life to a point where you don't want to deal with it. Because after I lost that child, I really turned to drugs and alcohol pretty bad. I used to be a pretty bad meth addict and heroin and anything anybody had. I used to shoot up, and that was my thing. But that was a long time ago. So,
Sarah, what was the thing that you wanted done? You told what your friends wanted, but I don't think you said what you wanted.
I didn't say what I didn't say. I wish to be beautiful. That's what I wished. I wanted to be pretty. I had really low self-esteem, and I had like a really horrible self-image of myself, which I could say is probably because of, adoption and, things I went through when I was a kid, abuse, and I had a really low self-image. But what's important is that now I've been able to really learn that it's not just how you look, but it's how you treat others and how you talk to yourself, your self-coaching voice, and how you talk to yourself is how you treat other people, kind of. If you're not genuine with the mistakes you've made, or you're not genuine with yourself, you're not going to be genuine with anyone else. So that's what I wish for. It's so petty though.
No, I get it. I really do get it. I mean,
right.
People wouldn't guess it, but when I was a kid, I struggled with the same kind of stuff. I was picked on all the time. In fact, I lived in a really rough neighborhood, and I'm not even kidding you. Almost every day of my life, I was in a fight with somebody. And I wasn't starting fights. Kids picked on me, and it got to the point where it's either you're going to let them beat you up or you're going to start defending yourself. And for 10 years of my life, it was like that. And that takes a toll on you. And it was a lot of racism. And so I'm Puerto Rican, and but my mom's white. And so I lived in a trailer park with a bunch of kids that were just, mean kids. And they called me every racist name under the sun. And when
I can relate to that.
Yeah. When I moved to a new school district, that was my 9th grade year, just going into high school. I moved to a whole different school district. I was new start. I was so messed up mentally that I would wear all black clothing because I thought it made my skin look lighter. And so, I mean, my self.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you.
I get it. No,
I can relate. Relate. I know how you feel. That's exactly what I did. I used to be gothic. It's sad. Yeah. Crazy gothic.
Well, I was a hip hop head, but I just made sure I wore all black because I just wanted to fit in. I was so desperate, and it took me about halfway through my high school years to really finally kind of let go of my past. And I never really truly let go of. In fact, even today, I still struggle with my past of my childhood and stuff. Right. But I finally was able to kind of let go in the sense of socializing with other people and stuff. And, so, I mean, you take the kid that I was, and I mean, that's just a segment of my life, but I mean, you take the kid that I was to the person I am today, and, people change. Like I said, people change, and life moves on, and so will you. It's a matter of what you want to do with it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in an all-white town, and I was the only brown kid, so I can relate to what you're saying.
One of my nicknames was Brownie.
Yeah, right. I mean, I was called Mexican Mafia, and I was like, yeah, that's me, one brown kid in Orderville, that's Mexican Mafia, watch out, I'll stab you with my butterfly knife, back up. Yeah. I grew up really angry, and I grew up, hating myself and how I looked, and I used to wear all black and do the black nail polish and dye my hair super dark, blue black. And I was also into sports too, and I played basketball and volleyball, and I was in all of the schools FFA and FUCLA and FHA and FBLA, the school things they have. Yeah. Yeah, it was ridiculous. I'm so glad high school's over. I see people all the time from high school, and I'm like, hey, I'm okay now. Thanks for sticking around, I guess. I'm okay now. I'm happy now. So you guys can approach me and say hi. So it's funny.
Yeah.
I find humor in it because I have to find humor in everything, so.
Sure. So, I mean, your childhood was, I'm assuming your experience with, your paranormal experiences as a little kid were before the Satanism that you took up, which to be honest with you, I would say that had probably, you picking up Satanism probably had a lot to do with your own self-image, and so it is what it is. But why don't you let us know, what happened here when you were younger and you thought that the devil would come for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was a really, really young kid. I was really young, and I'm in the same room I'm in now, except that the bed is on the other side of the wall. And every night I had to have my parents stand at the door and wait until I fall asleep because I was convinced, but I knew that the devil would come for me at night. He would come out of my closet at night. And then while he came out of my closet at night, he would hurt me. He would, if I had a leg sticking out, I would get pinched. I would wake up from being, and sometimes it felt like a burn. It felt like someone holding a match to me. It's the only way I can explain it. Or I don't know if you've ever use a lighter and held the end to the light to metal and then press it against you. Like I used to do that. And that's kind of how it was, the sharp shooting pain. And I used to wake up and I'd tell my parents, you know, I'm like, the devil, you know, something comes out of my closet at night and hurts me. And if I have a leg sticking out, it'll hurt me. And so I used to, and I still do to this day. Like I still can't have a leg sticking out. I can't have, I don't know. And and like, just like when I was a kid, I used to turn my back to the room and I would face the wall because it would be there. I could see a dark shadow in my room at night. And it seems like this all happened before I had my sleep issues, before I started having issues with my sleep. And it was before all that happened. And then I started having issues with my sleep. And I would sleepwalk and I would have night terrors and I would, wake up screaming, you know, or I'd wake up outside and it's, you know, just like waking up at 3:33 in the morning. There's a different kind of fear that's associated with waking up in a different place, you know, like waking up outside, you know, that's scary. Like it's, to me, it fills me with the most intense fear, you know, I've ever had. And my sister, and I haven't had this in a long time. And I used to have sleep paralysis too. And I absolutely hate my sleep paralysis because it's the same every time. And I can't not, you know, I used to have it maybe 3 or 4 times a month. And I have found something that helps me, you know, now that it's not so, it's, you know, it's not like a narcotic, you know, it's like for sleep, you know, that my psychiatrist has had me take. And so far I haven't had any issues. I still do have, I had sleep paralysis once, maybe about 2 months ago, but it's nothing like it used to be, you know, and it's like when I would get stressed or disassociate and be stressed out that it would happen. But, I see a therapist and I talk to somebody. And so I don't really get too stressed out like I used to, but, so the sleep paralysis was it's absolutely frightening. And I was waking up outside, you know, for me, like even when I used to wake up in bed and the bottoms of my feet would hurt because I had been walking around outside, you know, and with no shoes on, and we have gravel, you know, everywhere. And that's, it's creepy because you're like, I went somewhere, I don't remember being there, and I'm, you know, or I got out here and I don't remember getting up out of bed and getting here. And so, it was based on fear too, you know, I based my life on fear, you know, and it was really scary experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've never experienced sleep paralysis and stuff, but I've heard enough people talk about it that I don't think I want to go through it. So,
no, absolutely not. I would not wish that upon anybody. And for me, it's the same every time too. And so it's not like, it's weird. It's so bizarre. And, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it's because of the occult, honestly. A lot of it's based off of, doorways I've opened for myself in the past and trying to get rid of my so-called demons, I guess, you know.
Well, I mean, there's things that happened to you before you took up the occult that are pretty significant. I mean, you feel like things, you know, pinching your leg and things like that. I mean, there's something physically coming onto you at an early age. And that's why I wonder with like all this different stuff, because I mean, I don't put anything off the table when it comes to all these different experiences people have and stuff. And, you know, some of the things that sometimes I wonder, are they, related? The UFO experiences you've had, along with the
Right.
paranormal experiences, along with you eventually go into the occult for a little bit. I mean, are they all connected some way? The fact that your grandfather was friends with Travis Walton, who was a logger with him.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that. Do you know if your grandfather was one of the guys that was in the truck with him, or was he just a guy that worked with them?
I don't think he was one of those guys that was with the truck.
Okay.
You know what? I don't know, honestly. Like, they don't really, the one thing in my family is we don't really talk about my great grandpa. It wasn't until I had my experience with the lights that I did that I even had them opening up to me, and that's when they told me, he when he died, he died in absolute shame because he was a UFO enthusiast and he was an alcoholic, and he built a landing station for UFOs on his property up in the mountains, and people made fun of him, and it was this big joke, and so I feel like my family kind of like hid that from me, because they did hide it from me, until I started talking to them about these lights and stuff, and that's when actually my mom was telling me, well, first of all, my mom mentioned to me I told her the story about, my other story out at the cane beds, and she's like, well, Bigfoot are supposedly interdimensional beings. I'm like, oh, you believe in Bigfoot and you never told me. How dare you? I was like, of course they're interdimensional, talking to her. And I was like, this is how much my family has been closed off about it. They don't even talk about it, And
That's
my mom was telling me that when she was really young, see, my grandma, which would be my great grandfather's daughter, right? So, she was going to take, when my mother and her brothers and sisters were really, really young, she was going to take them all to California, to Mount Shasta, to a Bigfoot convention in the 60s and 70s, or the late 60s, early 70s. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Like, where's Mount Shasta? I didn't even know anything about it at the time. And she's like, oh yeah, well, we were going to do it, but she got threatened that they would take away her kids, take away us if she left out of state with us. And I'm like, what? Thanks for telling me, like, this, like, I'm not crazy that, I somehow was able to find my way to this stuff without their guidance, too much, except for when my grandma told me about fire in the sky when I was little. I still found my way to it, I still have found my way to it and had my experience, and even sharing about it, like, because I actually showed quite a few people the lights that I videoed, because I'm like, hey, if you have a better theory about what you think this is, please share with me, because I'm open to hearing what people have to say. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's a drone. It's a drone, I'm like, a drone, why would it follow me all the way from Kanab to Orderville? Like, that's a waste of money. Like, I'm the most boring person like they could ever choose to follow, I was like, I'm sober. I chair, AA and NA meetings. Like, I'm pretty sure they could follow much more interesting people than me, the cops, and I told them, I'm like, what is it? I opened it up, to people I worked with. I'm like, what do you think it is? And people are like, I don't know, Sarah. They're like, what do you think it is? I'm like, I don't know either. It's an unidentifiable flying object is what it is to me, and I think it's funny.
Yeah.
But,
what I find interesting too, a couple of things. One, it turns out my dad, used to listen to Art Bell and Coast to Coast in the truck at night when he drives, because he's a truck driver too. And I never knew that myself until I started looking into Bigfoot, and I told my family that I was really serious about it and stuff. And my dad's like, oh yeah, you should check out this guy. You should check. I'm like, hold on a second, and
exactly.
He's the one who told me about
the
Lauren
audacity
Coleman.
of you.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know. I was so new at looking into this stuff. I didn't know who anybody was, and Lauren Coleman is a really well-known person. And
right.
My dad's like, yeah, you should definitely look into Lauren Coleman. He's got a lot of great stuff. And I'm just like, all right, I'm just like eating it up, But my dad was, he listens to this podcast. I mean, he's gonna hear me talking about this, like he loves listening to this stuff while he's driving his truck. But I find it interesting that these things that you've experienced, and they kind of correlate with your family in a sense, but yet they're not blood. And that's what I find interesting.
I know. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, what are the chances? I would end up in this family and I would still have the same type of experiences without even knowing how in depth these guys were or anything. And I remember showing the video to my Aunt Connie, and I was like, well, I contacted MUFON. I'm like, do you know what MUFON is? And she's like, of course I know what MUFON is. I'm like, oh, okay. Didn't mean to, I'm like, of course you know what it is. Of course, everybody knows what MUFON is. Like, not really, but she said it like, of course I know, So I'm like, of course you do. Right. Exactly. Moving on. So this is what I saw. And, this is just, something that's been a part of the family that they didn't want to talk about. So I showed the video to my Aunt Connie and to my Aunt Valerie and to my parents, and they had told my grandma about it. And because I hadn't mentioned it to my grandma yet, or anything, because I wasn't going around town like, everybody look at what I've got, I wasn't really broadcasting it all over town. But so my grandma came down to the house and was like, I heard that you saw something. And I'm like, and at first I didn't really understand what she meant. I was like, what did I see? And she's like, I don't know. And she just points to the sky and her eyes go all big. And I'm like, oh yeah, yes, I did see something. Yeah. And like that, she didn't even want to say it out loud, that's, she didn't want to say it out loud because maybe she had said it out loud in the past and she'd been berated for it or made fun of or, cut down and made to feel or been disrespected over it. And I just felt so bad about how she, does that make sense, I guess? Because,
yeah, absolutely.
She didn't even want to say it out loud, but she was really, really intrigued by it. And talking about it with her, she was telling me about my basketball coach in high school and about how he had witnessed a huge orange light 20 up on Cedar Mountain, where I had worked at the gas station. I met Mr. Bindernagel, and they had an orange light follow them, she said. And she said that it scared the pants off of them. She said they were so scared. And I was like, oh, that's so bizarre that it's like an orange light, and I saw, an orange light. And I was telling my boss about it, this lady that I work with, and she told me that she had also seen an orange light in the sky in this area, except they were down further south in Arizona, up on the Kaibab National Park, like which is, just a little bit north of Snowflake, basically. And so this is like a common thing around here where people see an orange light, I guess. I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know anything about it until it happened to me and people shared with me their experience. My boss, she told me about an experience she had that was Bigfoot related. And she's like, I don't know what it was. But this is what happened. She's like, but I don't know what, she threw her hands in the air. I just don't know what it was. I just don't know what it could have been, and it's just funny, people's reaction to admitting something bizarre had happened, but not wanting to place what it is that caused it. And that's kind of a common theme I see with people where they're just like, this something bizarre totally happened, but who knows what it was? I'm like, let's not place the finger on it because, you know, once you start saying things like Bigfoot or UFO, people like speculate and they draw their own conclusion, and maybe it's a hurtful conclusion and maybe they're disrespectful about it, you know, which is something that comes along with Bigfoot and UFOs anyway.
You know, you mentioned it just a few minutes ago, and I want you to get into it because you told me personally, but you haven't told it for the audience. But before you get into how you met, you know, Dr. Bendernagel, because that's actually a pretty big deal. Because then you can, from that, I want you to segue into your possible Bigfoot experience. I know you want to, you know, probably refer to it as possible, but I don't know what else it could have been.
Right.
Before you get into that, I wanted to ask you. You have these experiences and they range from paranormal to UFO, and, you know, we've speculated, you know, where's the line between the two and things like that. But what are the freaking odds of your grandfather working with Travis Walton, the most famous UFO abductee probably ever, and then you having these experiences in your life? You know, like like your grandfather is such a Bigfoot or a UFO enthusiast that he built a freaking landing pad on his property.
Yeah.
You know, like this, like obviously what happened to Travis Walton, he believed, and it affected him deeply. And to have you, his great granddaughter, have all these experiences, something tells me your family has more experiences than they're leading on.
Oh, definitely. I totally agree. And I don't know how to make them tell me, you know. One thing about Travis Walton, and I think I shared it with you right before we started the interview, but one thing that my great-grandpa always said about Travis Walton was that he was stranger than a $3 bill. That's what he used to always say. And whatever experience Travis had and that he shared with my grandpa, I mean, I feel like that's what maybe started his enthusiasm for it. I don't know. There's no speculation because I actually never met him because he passed away before I was born. But you know, like, what are the odds that he had such a you know, he was so enthusiastic about UFOs and he knew and he worked with Travis Walton and knew him, you know, enough that he came home and told his family about it because my grandma knew about it. My grandma was the one that told me about it, you know. I mean, I feel like it had a deep impact on him, you know, and I feel like that because of that deep impact, that's what maybe boosted him towards being so involved in it too. Or he even having his own experiences. I feel like he probably had his own experiences, like judging and, you know, based off of how he was and how these things can affect you, you know, because when I had my experience, and this is kind of something the MUFON guy shared with me, was that he's like, well, you know, a lot of people use this as a moment in their life to, I guess, really hold on to Christianity. It's a spiritual moment for them. It becomes like spiritual, you know. And after I had the lights, the experience, I just wanted to just share this really fast because I forgot to mention it too. I had nightmares the next day, and it was a nightmare. I am not. The next night, I was so scared to shut my eyes. I had all the lights on in my room, and I was really scared. I was filled with fear for shutting my eyes and having and opening them up and seeing something standing next to me. And I had a dream. And in my dream, and maybe it wasn't a dream, but I'm going to take it as a dream because it was, well, a nightmare. And in my dream, I saw, it was, in my mind, it's really frustrating. There were 9 grays in my room. and each one took up a central square on the floor that glowed, and they were in silver, like wearing like a silver type of outfit, and they only reached just right above the doorknob in my room, and there was four. It was weird because there was four, and then there was three, but then there was one right next to me. It was, and in my mind, I was like, there are 9 here, but I only saw 8. I don't even know how to explain that, because I felt like it was like, I don't know, it was really scary, and in my room, I have like a table against the wall next to me, like across the wall. And it was like, there was 1, 2, 3, 4. So there were 4 central against the wall across from me. And it was like the one, clear in the corner where my table was, it was like inside the table, like it was standing there. And the table was still there, and it was standing there inside the table. Does that make sense? Like the table didn't exist, but the picture of it still did, the image of it, and it was able to stand there like in the table. And then in my mind, I respond in my head, there are 9 in here, but I only seen 8. And it still is so confusing, and it's really bizarre to me, and I don't understand what that meant. I want to believe it was a nightmare. After that, I couldn't sleep. I don't know. It was bizarre. And after that, I really, really, really turned to my scriptures. I started praying more, and I was looking on YouTube, and I saw a meditation to reject astral beings. And I did this meditation, and I haven't had anything like that happen to me again. Honestly, I haven't had that fear come back up for me like I did in my room when I was alone in my room. Like, it was the strangest thing. I can still see it in my head too as I'm talking about it. That and all 4 of them, they looked like copies, standing in a row. And then the one that was right next to me. But in my mind, I was thinking, there are 9 of them here. I don't know why I thought that. It's so confusing to me. But we can move past that, though. So,
well,
because we want to.
No, I actually want to ask you a question. Do you remember anything other than that experience? I mean, did they touch you? Was there any physical interaction?
I don't think so. I don't know. Thinking about it, like I'm talking about it right now, and like I'm sweating. Like I all of a sudden just started to like sweat really bad talking about it. Like, I think out of anxiety, and I don't know, fear, because I've never experienced anything like that before. Like, had that kind of imagery, even if it was a dream in my mind come up for me. I haven't ever had that. And I'm like when I was emailing you and I was sharing with somebody for the first time the incident I had out at Cane Beds, I was like sweating then too. I was like having anxiety, writing it down and reliving that moment. And this is the first time I've actually shared this with anybody too. This, this dream experience I had, a dream memory. I don't know what I felt when actually now that I feel like it was reaching towards me. Like that's what in my mind the fear came from, was the one right next to me reaching towards me. Yeah.
And then you woke up?
I woke up. Yeah.
Okay.
Was I asleep? I don't know. I don't know. Like I almost don't want to like admit that, because I was up all night and I was scared to blink. Like I was scared to shut my eyes. I didn't want to sleep. I couldn't sleep. I was so filled with fear, but I don't know if maybe I just fell asleep and I have this dream memory of this happening. But I know that dreaming about one, in my mind I said there are 9 here, but I only saw 8, and so it's thinking back on it, and so it's confusing. I don't understand what that means, but that reaching towards me scared me.
I can understand, the confusion in the whole thing. How long ago did this happen again?
This happened in June.
So very recently.
Yeah. Yes.
And remind me, early in your life when you were sitting at the edge of your bed, you saw the light, and then you wake up the next day. How long ago was that from now?
So I'm actually sitting here thinking about it, and it had to have been before I was 5, because my sister was not in the room, and my sister and I shared a room when they adopted her, and I was 5 when they adopted her. So this is when I was really, really small. And then after that, when I was baptized when I was 8, I was already having my sleep issues. So I don't know. Like, I asked my family, I'm like, do you remember when I used to do that? And they said, you always had trouble sleeping. You've always had trouble sleeping. And I'm like, no, but I'm like asking you, like, remember me saying that to you? Because I remember having that fear when I was a kid. And they were like, they said they didn't remember me saying that. And I'm like, I know I remember waking up in the night and seeing dark shadows. And I'm 32 years old, and I have to have a night light on when I sleep, because I have had fear at the dark for a long, long time in my life. And it really all started then. I used to have night lights I had to have a night light when I was little, but definitely now.
I think there's going to be there's a lot of stuff that, you may never want to do this, but if you want to if you get to the point where you want to really kind of get down to the nitty gritty of things, I think there's a lot of things that you're going to have to consider seriously to really figure out if it was just a dream or if maybe it was something more. Because if you just told me that story, if you emailed me that story and that's it, that's the only thing you had to tell me, I probably wouldn't even have you on the show, because it's just like, okay, well, it's probably a dream, but when you take that and pair it up with everything else you've experienced, everything else throughout your life and all the things, it's like, now you're looking at it as one related to the other. And it's like, you got to actually try to figure out if you can put it in a timeline, where it's like, that you put it from beginning to end, and you actually sit back and you look at it and you're like, where are the comparisons here? Are there comparisons? But that takes, you wanting to do that. And you may not want to do that, because it sounds like sometimes hearing you talk, you're just like, listen, I have these stories, I have these experiences, but I don't know how deep I want to get into figuring it out. So,
Well, yeah. Like the spiritual aspect of it, like the paranormal aspect of it, like, that's scary stuff. Like when when it happens to you, you know, like when you see things move, when like, cause like, something that used to happen a lot was our radio would come on every morning, every morning at 3:00 in the morning. The radio in our kitchen would come on, you know, like that doesn't happen anymore, but it happened for a long, long, long time, and not like every day, you know, but it was always the same time at 3:00 in the morning. And you know, I attribute that I feel like I have attachments. I feel like I've had attachments since I was really young, because I have always had this feeling of, I mean, I want to say that things happen like when I'm around. Sometimes I feel like I'm haunted. Is that, you know, like I'm a person that's haunted.
Yeah, I understand.
Like sometimes when I mean, you know, and using a Ouija board when I was a kid, you know, and how people say that Ouija boards aren't real. Like, I know there are some people that were on your show even talking about when their parents allowed them to use Ouija boards as a kid. And I was like, I'm so grateful. I never did that when I was really, really young, you know, and I only did it when I was a teenager, I guess. You can be grateful for anything, but, yeah, you know, like that, the dream I had when it came to the lights I saw and the missing time. And like, to me, that stuff is just like, you know what? I don't remember what happened when I had missing time. You know, I don't remember what happened. And if I'm not supposed to remember it, then I'm just going to let it be and let that just be how it is. When it comes to like that dream, you know, I had, I don't know, you know, if I want to open up my mind and admit that something, that these things came to me at night, because sometimes, and I don't know if this makes, you know, sometimes I wake up and I feel like I've had like a breathing tube in my nose, and like, I'm like, what, you know, and I was in jail actually, and I had instances happen to me there too. And I'm like, this is a jail, you know, nothing can happen to me here yet. I have this instance, these things happen, and I had things happen to me in jail too. We, you know, this is a brand new jail we have here, and we would see a dark shadow at night because the women are in 24-hour bookings, so there's no pod for the women. We would see a dark shadow moving around, you know, and this I feel like I'm haunted, you know, like I said, and
yeah.
And I don't know. And then you know, like the fact that you know, we were talking about like John Vindernagel, you know, at the time I was like, this guy is Cookie Dukes, you know, like Bigfoot. You're silly. Like this sweet little old man. Sorry.
How'd you go about meeting him? How'd that whole thing unravel?
So I was working at a gas station up on Cedar Mountain called Todd's Country Store, and which helped me remember all the stuff that how this happened. I couldn't remember John's last name. I couldn't remember who he was, but I remember he gave me his card, which I threw away. Oh, I wish I would have never thrown it away, but I remember distinctly being like, this guy is crazy, and throwing it in the trash. And so he was telling me that he was there, that he had people have sightings up on the mountain where I used to live. I used to live up in Duck Creek Village. And he was coming in to the gas station where I worked, and he would like one day I was trying to fix the ice cream machine, right? And this man is like super intelligent. Like he has 2 PhDs. Like he's an extremely intelligent man. And I'm like trying to explain to him like, so this machine is broken, but I think it's because I need to like fix this little thing here. And like, I'm explaining to him because he's like, what's wrong? You know? And I'm sitting there like, I have no idea how the machine works, but I'm telling him how I think it works. And he's like, actually, this machine runs off of a and he explained the entire thing to me, and like he was all excited with the way he talked, because the way that he, when he would talk to you and communicate, he was like, and then, and he was so exuberant with life and with the way he talked, and he reached his hand up in there and he pulled out a plug and it completely drained the machine. And I'm like, how did you know how to do that? And he's, I was like, wow, you must be a smart guy, And now I know it's because he's like extremely intelligent, like, has, an amazing education and probably knew how the whole machine ran. And I'm sitting there explaining to him, and he's like, this poor simple child. Like, and, so anyway, he was telling me about, the sightings that there were up on the mountain. He was asking me if I ever had any kind of experience up on the mountain, and I was like, no, man, like that's not real, and like actually we had an instance where we were all sitting outside in the middle of the night, and Duck Creek has this huge meadow, and we heard something running through the meadow, and we were like, oh, that's just a bear on two legs running, because we were all drunk at the time. And I was telling him, like, we did hear a bear running on his two legs in the meadow once. And he's like, that bears run on all fours. And we're like, oh, well, this one was on its back legs running. Like, and then like now I'm thinking like, I wonder he must thought it was like the stupidest person on the face of the planet, like, because bears don't run on their back legs. I don't think they do anyway. Still, but I was telling him that experience, and I'm like arguing with him, like, no, I'm pretty sure it was a bear, man. Like, bears are around here. Like, we don't have a lot of bears. I'm pretty sure it was a big bear, and anyway, it was hilarious. And so I met him and his wife and his grandkids, and his grandkids would come in and get ice cream, and that's how I met him with the ice cream machine and stuff. And so I couldn't remember his name after I was listening to, gosh, I think it was your show, and I was listening to, now I remember. So I finally admitted to myself that I had possibly had a Bigfoot encounter out at Cane Beds. And so I typed in Utah Bigfoot, and I'm pretty sure it was it might have been you. I can't really recall.
Might have been Nathan Rio.
What was it, Nathan?
Might have been Nathan Rio.
Nathan Rio?
If you were on...
Yes, that was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, because his YouTube channel was Utah Sasquatch.
Yes, Utah Sasquatch. And so I was like, oh, man, cool. So I was listening to it, and you guys are talking about Todd Standing, right? And his photos or his videos or something. And I'm like, oh, Todd. I'm like, that was the name of the guy that I met, because the place I was working at was called Todd's Country Store, right? And I'm like, Todd Standing must be the guy that I met. And so I typed in Todd Standing into YouTube, and the first video that popped up, it showed John Bindernagel, and he was talking, and I'm like, that's the guy that I met. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the dude. And then I was like, wait, his name, and I literally I didn't even know how to say his last name. And so I typed in like John Bindernagel into Sasquatch Chronicles, and then I found out that he had passed away, and I was so sad about it. And so that same day, I had a job interview at a rehab down the road. And so I decided, because I hadn't even driven on that Cane Beds Road, haven't even been back out there. I've been out there twice now since that incident happened. And so the whole way down, I listened to Wes when he was like talking about him passing away, and the stories that he had, and the people that would come on and talk about John. And it was just a pretty cool experience for me to be listening about John Bindernagel when I had met him years ago about Bigfoot, and driving past a place where I had my Bigfoot experience, and so I was like, okay, you know, like, and then I wrote to you about it, and I wrote to Wes as well, but yeah, so
Yeah.
That was just crazy how that happened too. And I remember looking down at John's card, his business card, and just being like, I should keep this. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I was probably hungover at the time. I was like a huge alcoholic then. It was a horrible alcoholic. I was a functioning alcoholic, which is the worst. And I threw it away. And I was just, I wish I hadn't done that, but it happened. It is what it is. But he really is one of the coolest guys, though, that I have ever met, you know, and he was telling me about how he's a wildlife biologist and how, you know, he loves being outdoors, and he, at the time, I remember him asking me about trees and like different tree formations or something like that along the. I'm not really educated in, I don't know what you'd say, Bigfootology, so Sasquatch.
Most people are,
you know. Yeah, and so I yeah, I didn't really know much about it, and at the now I know a little bit more. You know, I've listened to a few of Sasquatch Chronicles, and I understand that there are different like tree formations that they do, or they make stuff with trees, or that they like, you know.
Yeah. So I want.
It was a pretty neat experience.
It was a very neat experience. I mean, what are the odds that, you know, you're gonna you have all these experiences and you run into John Bindernagel at the gas station that you worked at, and he helps you fix a machine that was broken, and everything that you said about John is everything. I've never met with him. I've never had a chance to talk to him, but I've heard, you know, countless stories about John, and everything I've heard matches up exactly with what you just said. The kindest person, wants to help where he can, and very just enthusiastic about life. And he was like that until the day he died. He was like that until the day he died. And so it's a very cool story, very cool story. And since you mentioned it, I want to get into this possible Bigfoot experience you had. But I keep going back, but I just want to ask you one more question about this whole, your great-grandfather connected to Travis Walton thing. Now, I think it might have been before we started recording that you couldn't remember your great-grandfather's name. And I just want to read off to you the names of the men that were there that night, and just tell me if any of them sound familiar to you. There's Ken, John, Steve, Alan, and Dwayne. Any of those sound familiar? Okay.
My grandpa's last name was Hoyt too.
Okay, that's not one of those guys.
Hoyt.
Gotcha.
I think his name was Elza. Like I said, it's like a weird Mormon name. Because me and my family are all members of the Church of Latter-day Saints. So,
gotcha. Yeah, I just didn't. Yeah. I just wanted to read those names off to you to see if any of them ring a bell, and because I was gonna say, what are the freaking odds if
it did? I would throw my phone and break it, Tony. I really would. Like, if it was him, I would seriously be like, well, I gotta go like run my phone over with my car, because that would just be the most astounding thing. I don't know why I would guess I would do that, but it would be so astounding to me.
Mind-blowing.
It would be awesome though.
Yeah. So talk to us about this Bigfoot experience. I know that you had it with, I think you said your boyfriend, you and him stopped to get cigarettes or something like that.
Right. Well, he's actually the father of my two kids, my two youngest kids, and he's not around. I don't have anything to do with him. We don't talk. He doesn't visit his children. Not trying to malign him. I guess that is maligning him. I'm sorry. It is what it is. But at the time, I used to be very in love with him, and we were together, and this was when... this was about 3-4 years ago. So first got to explain the back cutty roads here in this podunk town we have. So there's a road that it's back then it was just a straight dirt road, and it went from all the way from Arizona 389 to Utah 89, like US 89, like the main highway. And so back then it was just a dirt road that people would take, that you could get down to like the big city a lot faster, because like we don't have a Walmart here, we don't have like Taco Bell here, we don't have, you know, JCPenney. We have like two grocery stores and a dollar store, and like that's it, you know. And we have like Wendy's and McDonald's, and that's what this town is consists of. Like we don't have so to get other stuff, we gotta go down to St. George, Utah. And so there's this cutty road, and we call it the Cane Beds Road, because it goes through Cane Beds, Arizona, and which is, I don't know if you're familiar with, is right next to Colorado City, where Warren Jeffs is from, who he's a polygamist of the FLDS Church, and he had that compound down in Texas that was like, where all the kids went in state custody because he was like, okay. Anyways, Colorado City, polygamist. You go right past there. I'm not trying to, you know, they have their beliefs, and I respect that. You do whatever you want with your life. You know, it's not my, but so, my ex, he grew up in Colorado City. His mother and his family are polygamous. So they actually got kicked out of Colorado City by Warren Jeffs, the Steve family, when he was really young. And they moved up to Cedar Mountain, where I met John Bindernagel, like that area. So him and his family moved out there. But he grew up when he was a little kid down that area for a while. And when he was in that area, Cane Beds and stuff, his family, this is what he shared with me. Yeah, this is what he told me, that as a kid, you don't go out past dark. You know, this is haunted. The canyons are haunted. That, I guess, like, oh, man, you know, it's just haunted. You don't go out past dark. You don't go play in the hills past dark. You don't even go up in the hills during the day without, you know, complete supervision, because without supplies or anything, because strange things can happen and you could end up dying really easily here. So that happens a lot here. Actually, there's a place called The Wave in Arizona, and there's about 3 or 4 deaths a year there, and it's all like considered to be like Indian burial grounds and sacred land, and that's also out at Cane Beds too. So we were driving along on the dirt road, and this is probably, once again, it's really late. 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, things happen to me a lot at 3 o'clock in the morning. They call it the witching hour or whatever, some nonsense, but things happen at night, and you know, and so we were driving along this road. We were in his Toyota truck. It's like a 1986. I Googled it just to see how much it weighed, because I'm like, I was curious.
Yeah.
So we're driving along this road, and I was like, I'm like, hey, you should stop. We should pull up in this canyon right here and smoke a cigarette. And he's like, no. This is you. You know, my mom raised us knowing, you know, we don't go out here at night. You don't go up in the canyons at night. You don't do any of that. You don't mess around with this stuff. And I'm like, whatever, pussy. Like, you're going to let your mom's little bedtime stories, like, scare you, you know. Come on, be a man. Let's just pull off the side of the road and have a cigarette. And he's like, dude, call me that, you know, whatever. So we pull off on the side of the road. And we go up in this canyon, and we park next to this big rock. And we get out. And the first thing we notice, and this is like, I mean, we step out of the truck, middle of nowhere, okay? This is literally like, I mean, the road itself, from one road to the next, it takes an hour and a half to drive this road, an hour to drive on this road. So this is, there's nothing out there. I mean, it's just wilderness. It's the desert. It's these red slot canyons, it's right next to Coral Pink Sand Dunes. And there's nothing out here. So the first thing that I noticed, which was the scariest thing, was that there were a bunch of coyotes, and they were yipping, and they were yipping like they were scared. Like if you ever heard a dog when he's scared and he whines and yips, it's how these sounded. And there was a bunch of them. There was a lot of them making this sound. It's serious. It's so unnerving. Like it was scary. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, what do you think they're howling at? Like, what do you think they're so scared of? And he's like, and he's already freaking out. He's like, I don't think we should be here. We need to go. We need to get in a truck. And then all of a sudden we're standing there and they all stop at one time, and it's complete silence. And it's scary. And you're like, we look at each other and he's like, get in the truck. And I'm like, whatever, fine. I was like, that is weird, right? It's so weird. So we get in the truck. And as soon as the dome lights go out in his truck, that's when I heard it. And I don't know what it was. And it was huge, whatever this made this sound. And it was a sound almost like a human mimicking a coyote. And it was a deep, you could tell it came from a deep within, like a big creature, a human. I don't know. I came to the fact that yes, this was a Sasquatch, and this was, it was so close. The sound of it, like I try in my mind, I try to block out the sound it made when it mimicked the coyote, because for some reason it struck a chord of fear into me that I've never experienced before. Whatever this thing was, it was alive. It was so close. It was right behind me on my side by the back tire. And we had just shut the doors, we had just jumped in, we had just gotten to the truck, and then we heard that sound. It was just the sound. It was the time of the dome lights going out in your vehicle. And, the first thing I did was I turned around and I slammed the door lock on the door shut. Like whatever it was going to be defeated by that door lock, by God, by man. It was not going to get in because I slammed the lock shut, So I turned to him and I'm like, did you hear that? I was freaking out, and he didn't even, his eyes, I'm telling you, the whites of his eyes I've never seen on another person. How much of the whites of his eyes were showing. They were huge. The size of saucers, of dinner plates. His eyes were huge. And he's just like fumbling with the keys, like trying to get the keys in, and he throws the truck into reverse, and we leave. And we're driving, and we're headed, like, we're going over, like, literally the wilderness. He's like bumbling through sagebrush bushes. He's like scratching like the side of his truck on rocks and stuff, because we were so petrified. I turned to him and I'm like, what was that? What made that sound? He's like, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. He's like, I don't know what it was. He's like, that's why we don't stop out here in the middle of nowhere, because this place is haunted. I'm like, this, and I was freaking out. I'm like, if it's haunted, then there was something standing there, There was something there. It wasn't haunted like a ghost, like, it wasn't a ghost that made that sound. It was a real living creature that made that sound. And so that's what was really the scariest thing about it. One of the scariest things about it. So we're driving down the main dirt road, and after that incident, I had a dream about that that moment when we're driving away from whatever that was, right? In my dream, it was the exact same thing. I relived the whole thing again. Except that I turned and looked to the right-hand side in my dream, and there's something running alongside the side of the truck in the dark, like a huge dark mass. In my dream, like in real, when I was actually experiencing that, I didn't turn and look. But the one, maybe, I don't know, like I could go back and relive that moment in my mind, and I didn't look out the side on the right hand side, but I had a dream memory. I don't know what it is, of turning and looking and seeing something moving alongside the car. So we get down the road maybe 10 minutes, and he's like, "Oh, I know there's a really good hill up here. We can take the truck in and use my 4-wheel drive. We can go 4-buying," is what he called it, which is stupid, but whatever. He was really proud of his truck and wanted to climb up this sand hill. So we were like, well, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, whatever was back there, it's still back there. It didn't follow us. We're fine. We're safe. I'm telling myself these things. He pulls off the dirt road into the wilderness again, and we're driving up. We get to this hill, excuse me, and we're pointed up towards it, and we start going up this hill. And if you're in sand and you have 4-wheel drive, his truck was made to go up hills like this. And we could not get up this hill. It kept bogging down, and you could just hear, the truck, straining and, groaning. It was like something was holding the back and bogging it down. You could hear the bumper as it hit the sand, like something was grabbing it and pushing it down. And I was like, why is your truck doing this? What is going on? And it just kept going. We could not get up this stupid hill. We got maybe 3/4 of the way up this hill, and all of a sudden it just goes pop, and the truck pops up, and we have no problems. We get up the top of the hill. We smoke a cigarette, we get out, and I'm like, what in the hell is wrong with your truck? It's super dark. We can't see anything, And he's like, well, I want to do it again. He's like, my truck shouldn't have done that. I want to do this again. And I'm like, oh, my Lord, fine. Not like we didn't just experience, something out there in the wilderness wanting to kill us or something, But, okay, let's take your truck up the sandhill again because you're a man and you have to prove something. So we get back down the hill and we turn around. Yeah, typical redneck, actually, is the right term for it, which is fine. Redneck, you live your life, man. You do you, boo-boo. Anyway, so we turn around, we get down the bottom, we turn, driving through the wilderness, driving through bushes and sagebrush, killing bushes. And we get down to the very the spot where we started. And you can see a left tire. You can see a right tire in the sand. And then in the middle of the tire indentations, you can see feet indentations. Something was dragged up the hill that had feet. Something was dragged. Something was hanging on to the back of his truck, and it was trying to get us stuck. I feel like whatever it was trying to get us bogged down in the truck and trying to, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was trying to scare us. I don't know, but you could clearly see in the sand the feet indentation and then the 2 tire indentations all the way up the hill, halfway. Well, not all the way up, about to the spot where we, popped up out of the sand. And we were able to go all the way up the rest of the hill. I turned to him. I told him whatever it was back there that we heard, it followed us and it was trying to get us stuck in the sand. I'm like, I know, with every fiber of my being, I know that's what it was trying to do. And he was like, well, that's why we don't come out here at night. And that's why this place is. And I was like, dude, don't even start. So he goes up the hill. We have absolutely zero problems going up this hill again. That's what this stupid truck was made for, is going up these sand hills. And we get up to the top. We go back around, and I haven't been back there since. I haven't been back there since, except for the 2 times. And the one time I was listening to the one about John Bindernagel, and the second time I was coming back through there at night. And I was so scared the whole time. It was like just a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, I have absolutely zero explanation to what that was. Well, other than it was Bigfoot. It was a Bigfoot. Like, seriously. I shared that experience with my mom, and I was like, because I told her, I'm like, it was the weirdest thing, because all the way up the hill, you can just see, the tire, and then the 2 in the middle. I'm like, but it's like, it didn't like walk away. Like, you couldn't see an indentation in the sand where it just walked away. Like, it was just all of a sudden gone. And it was, like it disappeared. It popped up. The truck went on its way. We went on its way. And that's when she was like, well, they're interdimensional beings. And I'm like, oh, you believe in Bigfoot. How dare you not kill me?
So do you know if there was any like dents or handprints or anything like that on the back of his truck, like something was holding on to it? Did you guys even think to check that? No.
So his bumper, it's actually it's like a metal, it's like an iron tube, and he had custom made it himself, and it's like it's like an inch thick, and I can't even explain it. I wanted to actually message him and ask him to send me a picture of it. So if he sends me a picture of it, I'll send it to you. But because it's just like a steel, like a steel beam that he took and in a circle, a tube, and he just welded it to the back of his truck and put it on there so you wouldn't get stuck in the sand, like it had weight added onto it, And because that was my first thing, was I'm like looking at the back of his truck thinking like, it was scary though. I can't think of any kind of explanation. And see, in my mind, I was just like, this is ancient, there are a lot of petroglyphs in that area. There's a lot of, like the rock dwellers, the canyon dweller people. And so there's a lot of that stuff left behind. And so I'm like, it's just a skinwalker, and somehow it hated us and it wanted us to die. I don't know. And so for a long time, I used to believe that. And I used to just hate hearing about Bigfoot. And it wasn't until I was sitting there thinking about John Bindernagel, and I wasn't thinking of the two together, but I was like, why do I feel so strongly about Bigfoot, And I remember telling my friend Alexis, I'm like, they're never going to find him. It's not real. It doesn't exist. And I'm like, why do I feel so strongly like that? And I'm like, it's not like I haven't had a Bigfoot experience. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that happened on the cane beds. Like, what was that? That falls exactly for me into the genre of what I think a Bigfoot could possibly do. It mimicked the sound of something else. It held, it was big enough that it could hold something like that truck back. I'm telling myself, I feel like that's why I felt so strongly about Bigfoot, was because inside I knew that that's what that could have been, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. That's what I think. When you look at all the things that, happened in that short period of time, you start putting two to two together, and just like, even if it was a person, that was dragging on the back of the truck. I mean, that doesn't make sense because, you know,
doesn't.
I could grab on the back of your boyfriend's truck and he would just drag me along.
Exactly.
And I certainly would still be there when I let go because I'd be beat up, you know, like I wouldn't just get up and walk away.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I was like looking online. I'm like looking up the type of truck that he had. It's like a 1986 like Toyota. And I'm like, it weighs 2,000 pounds. I'm like, I'm like, oh, a ghost is going to just hold back a 2,000 pound truck. Like, come on, Sara, like, let's think a little bit. Like, let's open up our minds a little bit here and try and imagine that maybe it wasn't a ghost. Like, you know, like, come on, Sara, I was telling myself.
Well, Sara, I'll tell you what, you've had some intense experiences throughout your life. And I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
Yeah, I appreciate being able to come on and really talk about these things. Like I said, like I told you before, you know, I haven't really shared too much of these experiences until I talked to you, and I've really kind of come to terms with like, these are things that happened, you know, take it or leave it. Like, this is what's happened. If, you know, I like to keep an open mind, like, you know, if you have an explanation for, you know, people I know, I'm like, if you have an explanation for these things, then go right ahead and tell me how you feel about it, because I'm not trying to disclose or any, you know, say that it's something that it wasn't. You know, I'm open to all kinds of stuff, I guess, and theories and whatever. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best way to be, to just remain open and keep your mind open about things, because that's how you're really going to find out, you know, what you went through and also what these things are. I mean, we got to just keep an open mind. That's basically what I say all the time. I hammer that into the ground. Keep an open mind, please. So
exactly, yes. And like, you know, when I was showing people the pictures and the lights, when I experienced the lights following me, because I have this one photo, and I don't know if you actually even looked at them or not or anything, but the one photo I have is of this weird light coming up out of this tear-shaped orange object in the sky, and it looks like a shooting star coming out of this object. And every time I get to that photo, people are like, "What? What is that?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know, I'm like, I don't know what it is. I'm like, that's why I want to find out. You know, that's why I'm open to trying to hear what other people say about it, I guess. It's also fun to hear what other people have to share, too. So.
I actually have that picture open on my computer right now, and I blew it up. And zooming in on it, it just gets all pixelated, and, you know, that kind of sucks. But
is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when I shared the ones with, because I had the MUFON interview, and I sent him the photos, and he was like, yeah, I can't really zoom in too far on them. And because some of them I just took my camera out and I took a picture of it, like right there. Right. And then when you zoom in on it, it's, you know, it's the weirdest thing. And it has like this weird black circle behind it. And it looks like the sky is opening up and letting this object come through. And it's bizarre. I don't know. You know, man, crazy things out there. Twilight Zone, you know. That's just whatever it is, man.
It is what it is. So
that's right.
I really appreciate you coming on and talking, though.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it. And good luck with your endeavors and everything that you do. I really appreciate you and the work that you do and allowing people to come on and talk about things that I've been able to relate to and really feel comfortable with myself and being able to even talk about it in the first place. So thank you, Tony.
Oh, right on. Yeah. Well, you got my email, and I think we're friends on Facebook. Feel free to reach out anytime.
All right, no problem, man. You have a good one.
Well, that's the show, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please go ahead and share it with your friends. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, email. I don't care how you share the show, but just share the show. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and sign up for our First in Line text message community. You see, if you are part of social media and the confessionals, you're not guaranteed to see everything we put out because it gets buried very quickly. Plus, you're not guaranteed that we're not going to be censored either. And for you to sign up as part of First in Line text message community guarantees anything important coming out from the confessionals, you're going to be the first one to hear about it. So if you want to be part of this community, go ahead and text the word YUP, Y-U-P, to 844-215-0819. That's 844-215-0819. Text the word YUP, Y-U-P, and you'll be first in line to learn anything important coming from the confessionals. Hey, thanks for watching the Confessionals on YouTube. If you like what you heard, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button, and hit the like button. That would be a great help to me. And if you want more of the Confessionals on a weekly basis, every Thursday I come out with a special show just for members on my website. So if you want to check that out, go to theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the join button, and become a member today. And every Thursday, you'll get a new show, and you can binge on previous shows, which there's almost 100 of them. So if you love the show, go ahead and check it out. But thank you very much for being here on YouTube and checking out the channel.